everyone, this is Jill Hurston with Synerzip. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. I'd like to remind you that I am recording this session, so you will receive a direct link to the recording in your email tomorrow. That will take you directly to our website with the recording and the presentation. For now, I'd like to introduce Mike Watson. He's our VP of Engineering with Synerzip. He will be moderating today. Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Jill, and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Performance Reviews That Don't Suck. Just about everyone has had to do performance reviews at one point or another, and probably everyone has also at one point dreaded the process. Today's webinar talks about how to make the review process more effective, more tailored to knowledge workers, and ideally less stressful for everyone. I want to encourage everyone to ask questions throughout the webinar. As they come up, I will pass them along. And with that, I'd like to introduce for today our speaker, Todd Little, CEO at Lean Kanban. Todd, take it away.
Yeah, so thanks for the introduction and thanks for getting going here. Today I'm going to talk a bit about performance reviews and trying to make those reviews that don't suck. This reflects upon a long journey of mine as a manager and leader, and my personal reflection on how I tried to do performance reviews the way the book taught me to do the performance reviews, and just continued to struggle doing them. I wasn't happy, my employees weren't happy, and eventually I came across a moment of realization what we were really trying to accomplish, and that's really where I'm going to go with. So just a little bit about me. I'm currently the CEO at Lean Kanban. Lean Kanban is a management training company. We deliver certified Kanban training. We have a network of trainers throughout the world that we help license our material, and we train people how to develop, how to use Kanban for knowledge work, not just software, but anything that's knowledge work related. In my prior career, I had been a number of leadership roles as VP of Product Development at IHS, as the Director of Software and Technology at Halliburton, and a subsidiary of theirs called Landmark Graphics. I was very involved in the Agile Alliance and in the starting of the Agile Development Conference back in 2003. I co-developed that with Alistair Coburn and started getting involved in the Agile community. And helped start up the Agile Leadership Network, which is where I met David Anderson, and David Anderson is literally the founder of Kanban for knowledge work, and who I'm working with now. My partner on this presentation is Andrew Tuttle. He's currently Executive Director of Product Development at IHS Markit, and this story is going to be largely about what we did when I was at IHS, which is now IHS Markit. But it also reflects upon things that I had done really in my, over 20 years plus as a manager, trying to understand how to do performance reviews and do performance reviews in a manner that was more productive for everyone. All right, so why do we do performance reviews? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? What is it that the organization wants out of it? What is it that individuals are looking for? Normally when I do this interactively, I'm going to present interactively. I'll also ask the audience and get a list of things. I'll go through really the things that I generally hear here. So what is it that I hear from audiences? Basically, we want to, things like setting goals. We want to measure performance against those goals. We want to see how we're doing. We want to establish reward structures. And we want to provide career development. And these are sort of the typical responses I'll get, and what you see from that is these are all good things we might want to try to accomplish. Yet it puts a lot of burden on the system, right? And so it's not that any of these are bad things, but we have to understand what is it that we're really trying to emphasize when we are working with the system. And so I think that key element of where we're trying to emphasize, and when you have so many different things you're trying to accomplish, it's sometimes hard to do any one of them well. And one of the things we came away with is we wanted to make sure we knew which part of it we wanted to emphasize in order to get the results we ultimately desired. The traditional approach that people use for performance reviews, what seems to be taught in most management training and used throughout many large organizations, is to use an approach called management by objectives. Set some objectives, monitor those objectives, evaluate them, and reward based on the results of those objectives. So this is sort of a very traditional approach, and done in some sort of cycle. And then we're told also, in order for this to really work, well, what we need are things called SMART objectives. Objectives should be specific, they should be measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And so this is sounds all well and good. If we have goals which are objectives and goals which are meeting all these criteria, then we just measure against them, and everything should work out well. The problem with that is that it doesn't seem to work so well, and particularly in knowledge work, we find a lot of challenges with SMART objectives. So this was something that my partner Andrew found going through an HR manual, an actual HR manual, and this was a SMART objective example that they provided. To increase code production rate to some number of lines of code per unit time by some date. Right? And so this is objective, it's measurable, it fits all the measurements of SMART, but it doesn't look very smart to me. There's all sorts of challenges, all sorts of things that could go wrong with an objective of this type. Not one that I would find very valuable, or something that I would even want to try to measure. Yet SMART objectives, I find, often have unintended consequences. We go to just our great example from Dilbert, and we see the boss is going to say he's going to have a goal to write some bug-free software, and he's going to pay $10 bonus for every bug he finds and fixes. Right? What could possibly go wrong? Why is everyone so happy? Everyone's just excited. Well, Wally's going to go write himself a new minivan this afternoon. These are the types of challenges we have when we set SMART objectives, things that have goals and actual measurements, but they have these unintended consequences. Is this what we're trying to do? Is this driving the right behavior? I think it's not. We've run into the idea that the SMART objectives are a big part of the problem that we've encountered. And the reality in knowledge work is that these are the situations. First of all, we find that SMART objectives have trouble because they don't comprehend the uncertainty that's inherent in our work, inherent in our business. They often have unintended consequences. They also provide a myopic approach to career coaching. They're really not providing guidance. They're really very, very goal-oriented, not really driving the future of career perspective. And lastly, and I think this is the most important element of SMART objectives, is that behind every objective is a subjective. This was a realization I came to, and what really sort of triggered me with it is that whenever I've set an objective, you've always got to ask the question, well, why that objective? Why that number? And once you finally get to it, you'll realize that you ask why enough times, there's some subjective reason as to why that objective was set. And so if you've ultimately got a subjective behind every objective, what are you accomplishing by putting that objective out there? Why not just stick in a subjective manner? Is there a point where you can look at things much more subjectively, and then also look at it in terms of, is it providing the guidance that we're really after? So that's where we realized that SMART objectives, not only problematic, but they had these issues, and in fact, were rather dumb. So let's look at somebody else, W. Edwards Deming. One of the things he came out with in his 14 points was to abolish management by objective and annual performance reviews. So don't do them, just don't do them. And that's part of the problem. He understood management by objective was not really working well. It was actually was counterproductive. But what he never actually came out, he did come out strong in terms of what else we should do. What should we do instead? And so that leaves a bit of a void, and I think we've come to the realization there are things we can do, and we can abolish the management by objective part, but we can still actually provide value to our organization and to our employees. So do performance reviews have to suck? And I think our conclusion is no. There's things we can do this came to the realization when I was doing that. There's things we actually care about. There's things we want to accomplish in looking at developing our organization capacity and our people. What can we do better? So some of the guiding principles that we worked with is that, and this came out of a conversation I was having with Andrew, and I made a conversation on the phone and saying that value is what we value, and he heard me say values are what we value, and we came to realize that actually both of those statements are true. And he had been, the values are what we value is certainly something that Reed Hastings from Netflix is well known for, and I think it's very true. We wanted to emphasize that we're looking for developing some core values, and those values are what we're in our developers, in our technical people. What are we trying to grow? So we realized we came out with we're calling it discovering the core responsibilities. We ended up calling them core responsibilities. I'm not sure that's the best name for them. It's what we ended up choosing. They're not quite competencies. They could be core values, but in any event, what we realized, and this is evolution, I said, of what I had been doing for a number of years in my previous organization. I think when I started, I had probably 7 of these, and I ended up whittling it down to 5. I think 5 turns out to be a really nice number, and I'm pretty happy with where we've gotten to with 5. And essentially what we're saying is it's what we're looking for. We're looking for a bit of a balanced scorecard. We're looking for how are we doing from a delivery perspective, how are we doing from business engagement, how are we doing from teamwork, how are we doing in terms of making sure we're building quality software from the ground up, and then finally, how are employees taking initiative and innovating. So these were the types of things that we really wanted to be looking at. How are we doing in these areas? So these were the core areas we were focused on. And then related to that, this is the second part I had where I was looking at, well, so those are the values that we value, but we also value the value delivery, right? How much an individual is delivering is really important to us, and what we came to realize is that impact, what impact they're making in our organization is our primary measure of their career development and their career growth. And that impact is a combination of the behaviors that they exhibit, the skills that they have, and the opportunities that they are able to utilize. So if we look at those 3 areas, behavior, skills, and opportunity, it becomes 2 responsibilities. One is the responsibility of the leader in order to help that, and the other is the responsibility of the employee to work with that. So the leader's responsibility is to coach behaviors, to foster skill development, and to create opportunities for the employees. And then the employee's responsibility to that is to evolve their behaviors based on the coaching, to develop their skills, and to seize the opportunities and to utilize them to be able to take advantage of that. As we're looking at career growth, one of the things we also realized we have to make sure, and this was one of the things I faced with looking at performance evaluations, was that a lot of times when I was asking managers to do performance evaluations, they always would give the higher grades to their very, very, very senior people. And then we started to look at things and we said, well, shouldn't they actually be performing at a very high rate already since they're very senior? And eventually we realized, yes, with a promotion comes higher expectations. We need to be setting the bar higher to be able to understand where are they performing at a level commensurate with the expectation. So we have, these 5 areas of core responsibilities, and then looking at what is the delivery against expectations, right? So if we have we have 3 developers here. We have Mark, Bill, and Steve, and Mark is a young associate. We have different expectations for him than we have of Steve, who's the senior principal. We expect great things coming out from that level. The other thing we came to conclude in our system was that we valued career development over a forced performance ranking, right? So we're looking at what can we do to create an environment where we're creating the conversations with our employees that's really focused on where they're at in their career, where they are performing, what are they doing, what can we help them do to improve, how do we align them better, and not so much as a numbers game. Now, if there's a number game that is forced on us by some corporate rules, we work to to figure that out, but that wasn't our emphasis. We really wanted to emphasize making sure we were having the right conversations. So then we look at, okay, this is what we started with. Well, what did we do? What was our next steps in taking this on? So as I said, we discovered our core responsibilities. We worked at that as the baseline. These are the 5 areas that we really focused on. We then went into more depth in each of these areas. What are we really talking about? And creating some more specifics about what we're looking for. So, for example, in quality and software, what are we looking for? And we're looking for, are we writing clean code? Are we building automated unit tests, integration tests, peer review types of things? Are we reducing technical debt? So these were key contributions that were added to things. So we built into more depth into these 5 areas. We also looked at them in terms of establishing levels of expectations. So are we expecting behavior with direction at a very junior level, or down to a very visionary level at our very, very top performance level, top category executive software engineer at the time was called. So this creates sort of a combination of areas of responsibility and then degree of expectation associated with them, which gets us to what we created as our core responsibility framework. So we start here with the 5 areas, and then here with the 5, with the different levels of performance that we're looking at. And then if you think of this, you can look at this and say, look at each one of those areas. We also wrote up essentially a description of that describe the behavior that we're looking for at that, for each one of those areas. So delivery at a very junior level, what are we expecting from that? Whereas, how does it change and how does it evolve as we move up into more advanced levels? So we had a very, you could call it a subjective rubric that we'd have to look at, well, where are people at? A bit of a litmus flavor of where are you performing at a junior level, or are you performing at a higher level? From that, then, okay, our next step in the process was to partner with our HR partner. In this case, at the time, it was Abby Britt. She was doing she had come on and was our business partner for the development group within IHS. And she was very interested in what we were doing. We had sort of kicked this off ourselves. It was a little bit kicked off by HR, then it was kicked off we took over and started running with it because I had come into the organization fairly new. Abby was also fairly new into the organization. And so when I came in, I wanted to bring the approach that I had been using with quite a bit of different success and evolving over the years. And Andrew had already been doing some work with it, and so we sort of combined and pulled things together. And it was really great because we pulled a lot of what I had done, but we also helped augment it by new work that Andrew was doing, and then also getting HR involved and helping as a partner really helped smooth things out, because we did have some challenges in fitting into legacy HR systems, and it was great to have great partnerships so that we could get around that and work through those in the simplest manner. In prior times when I'd been working with it, I'd done both HR support and sort of under the radar of HR, where they were really not even involved in it. And it really just depends on where you're going. But it's the nice thing about the system is it does sort of work in order to fit into existing systems, or it can be even better if you've got the right type of support from your organization. The other thing is
Todd, quick question for you on that last one. So when you started communicating this out to the organization, how was that received by the team?
When I first brought it into my management team, they were ecstatic because they were so frustrated with the existing system that they thought, oh, this is fantastic. It gives us something we can work with. And I think they were in such a state of frustration trying to deal with the old approaches, what they were told to do, and then no one had really given them any guidance before, I think also. So when I brought it into my team, they were quite ecstatic. I think every time I've introduced this, I've always gotten very positive feedback from both the leaders and from the employees, because they felt like it provided a much simpler structure and just enough structure to provide the guidance that was helping them along, right? So I think it went quite well. Occasionally you get a few initial responses of that, oh, what is just another new thing here. But I think almost always it's what I found when I've introduced it, not only do they like it, but they want to contribute to make it even better. And so that's how I've evolved it over time, and felt like it has gotten better every time I've introduced it.
That's great. It sounds like you didn't have to sell it too much.
No, it was actually pretty easy. It was great to have HR on board, because they were wanting to sell it for us. So usually it's other people wanting to sell it, and I just want to get the things done. So. And on the selling, to the limited extent we did sell it to Abby, one of the things in HR, one of the things that we emphasized was that some of the things that MBO is trying to get in terms of feedback loops and try to setting goals, that we already, since we were predominantly a Scrum organization at the time, a little bit of pockets of Kanban had initiated by that time, but largely a Scrum organization, we already had the feedback loops. We already had people in 2-week iterations that were establishing goals and delivering against those goals. So we already were having the types of things that the goal setting elements were already being accomplished automatically. We were really much more focused on the career development and emphasizing how to help the individuals better. So the other thing we did, and this gives great credit to Andrew on this, is he really worked on putting together a pilot program rollout, developed a manager's guide. In the past, when I had rolled it out, I thought it was relatively self-explanatory and provided just a couple of pieces of paper, and that usually did work. But it really did help that Andrew put this manager's guide together, because a lot of our managers had not been through any formal training, and so giving them really a playbook to work with and the types of things that we're looking for, I think was quite helpful. I think it really helped our managers understand what we were looking for out of the program, and also what they should be looking for from their employees. So this was a great addition. We gave, Andrew developed this graphical view of the model, which also I think helped a lot. It was a way to visualize it. And so we could place and say, here's where someone is performing, right? And independent of what level they're at, this is where they're performing. Now, if we come in and say, well, this is the level that they're currently at, we see that they're doing pretty good in delivery, and doing great in delivery area here. They're doing acceptable in customer focus and teamwork, but they're actually maybe a little bit behind in quality and innovation. So is this a problem? Maybe, maybe not. Right? This is things but these are the opportunity for conversations, right? So conversations are, fantastic job you're doing in delivery. That's great. Awesome. Keep that up. Yet these other areas, quality and innovation, might be holding you back, right? So these are, if you want to grow your career, these are conversations we can have with the individual based on this. What's holding you back? What are you doing great at? Where you want to, if you want to strive for a different level, these are the things you're probably going to have to do in order to improve. We'd have a different conversation if somebody was at a lower level, right? Now they're doing fantastic, even better in delivery, and yes, they're a little bit, they're not at the next level in quality and innovation, but they very well might be ready for promotion at this point. So this is the type of conversation that we can have. Here's some, the thing we discovered, there are sort of some archetypes. This is maybe one, John the journeyman. Somebody that's been, they're doing good. They've been around they've been around. They're, maybe, an older gentleman. He's been doing good. He's kept things up pretty well, but in performing at an adequate level. But they may be falling a little bit behind in newer technologies. Okay, So this is a conversation we can have. Does this matter? I mean, if they're comfortable with where they're at, we're comfortable with where they're at, this may not be a barrier. But if they want to change something, then it could be a barrier, or it could be, this is something that we can observe and say, hey, look, maybe we could work together to create more opportunities of some sort that would help in these areas of innovation and initiative. So these are the model helps us with the conversation, and really it's all about the feedback and the conversation, and the model is just the facilitator of providing us a guideline for that. So here's a tale of two developers. We have a front-end developer, Ed, and then we have a back-end developer, Oz. Right? So we're going to focus really on the story of Oz. Oz is a bit of a wizard, but he gets no respect. For some reason, people are paying no attention to the man behind the firewall. Right? So he's going to take some initiative. He's going to become a full stack developer. That's the thing, and he's going to show what he can do. So he does, right? And he comes to his performance reviews and says, "Oh, wow, I did fantastic. I exceeded expectations. The code was toxic. It was spewing crap all the time. I turned it into a functioning control center." Well, what's wrong with this picture? What did he do? He created a monstrosity, right? And what's the challenge here? We've got Ed and Oz. Oz is thinking he did fantastic, but he didn't pay attention to what the customers actually wanted. They didn't want a system like that. They didn't want a two-headed monster. They actually liked what they had. They just wanted to overall work better. And he wasn't working with Ed either. He wasn't a team player, right? So we applaud his initiative, off the charts, great job. He's doing great delivery work and quality's up top notch. That's awesome. But he's significantly underperforming, and it's holding him back what's going on with this customer and teamwork. So yeah, obviously there was some feedback loop challenges here. We didn't have things under control, and these are things we should have been going. So I'm just allowing imagine that this was what happened. But these types of behaviors we see. I mean, even when we have fairly good feedback loops and controls, we still see people who are taking their own initiative and challenge. So this is a conversation we can now have. Okay, Oz, you really want to improve. We want to create the opportunities for you to take the initiative. Fantastic. But we've also got to be working step in tune with what customers actually want, and we want to be a better team player, right? So these are the conversations to have. Some of the other archetypes that we've encountered, things like we've got Quincy, the quality evangelist, doing a great job with quality, and decent jobs in other areas, but maybe not, a little bit underperforming perhaps in delivery and initiative, something of that sort. Conversations we can have with them. Great. We don't want you to lose your quality perspective, but if we want to grow to the next level, we're going to have to up the game in a couple of other areas. Heather the hero is doing a fantastic job with delivery. Customer focus is up there, so really a tight loop with the customer and delivering, but maybe not nearly as tight a loop with her other teams, with her peers on the development team. So maybe an area for her to work on. Now here we have a situation, Ivan the individualist, has lower expectations, lower job grade, and probably ready for promotion, right? The teamwork may or may not be a hindrance in getting to that next level. That's a judgment call, obviously. We sort of came to the conclusion that we're looking for a solid 3 or 4 solid performances at the next level for us to promote. And usually we didn't consider one to hold them back unless it was way really way underperforming, in which case, we looked at the aggregate behavior and said, is that holding them back from performing at the next level? But all of this was the structure by which to have the conversations with people. And then we have people great at teamwork.
I think you just might have answered one of the questions that came in, which is, what is the minimum bar for moving someone up to the next level? And it sounds like it's not that all of the behaviors have to be at the same level. There are exceptions.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, correct. I think when we started, we had teams that were thinking, individuals thinking, and so maybe our idealistic thinking was, yeah, they should be at that level across the board. And I think what reality hit us, and we said, no, it does. We have to make a judgment call. It's definitely a judgment call, and the whole thing has a subjective judgment around it. I mean, we're looking for overall, are you performing roughly at the level we're looking for? And this is a framework for us to have that conversation. But I would say generally, we're looking for good solid performance in at least 3 out of the 5, and nothing that's holding you back out of the other 2. I would say that would probably the least. I think preferably we'd see 4 solid ones that were performing at that next level. And the other thing, we would always have the conversation about what we can do to increase to take anything that's holding them back to a point where it's not holding them back, right? So that was the other thing we did find as the levels got more and more, as we went to more and more senior levels, there did tend to be a natural specialization there, and so we would have a little bit more slack in a couple of those areas. But we were always, again, looking for making sure there was no detractor, something that was holding them back.
Okay, great. Hey, while we're on this slide, there was a question that came in about the impact column. Can you explain a little bit more about what's intended there?
Repeat that again?
Oh, the impact column, the first column on your slide. Can you explain a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, so the impact column is the level, is basically what level. So the red line here is telling us what's the performance level that we expect of them. And I guess it is a little bit, the text may be a little bit small here, but, we're looking at, is the behavior, like in this case, is it self-directed level behavior of a sort of a mid-level developer that they're sort of on their own, available to be able to work without a lot of additional guidance, or are they behaving with support, where they're really requiring a lot of a fair amount of hand-holding in order to get work done, or have they moved to the next level, which is a leader, extraordinary contributor with broad and deep impact. So the 2 pieces here are impact and behaviors. One is the type of behavior they have, and the other is what impact they're having on the organization.
So in the example column of self-directed, the feature means they're able to impact features of the product.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
Not
features of
really more.
Yeah, so they're more than just a single user story. They may be a collection of stories that are intertwined. They actually can guide that from that level. That's sort of.
That makes sense to me.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. And then here we have Doug, the domain expert. So great with customer focus, excellent with delivery, and even good with innovation. So just different types of patterns that we see. Again, types of conversations associated with that. So then we get to the question, and this brings back the earlier question that you asked, is how do our managers like it? So we decided we would run a survey after the fact. Like I said, we had some initial response that seemed pretty positive, but said, let's go run a survey, see how our managers liked it. So we asked, how likely are they to support utilizing these core responsibilities for initiatives, and this was done in 2015, so again in 2016. And as you can see, 100% said either highly likely or likely. So very, very positive response back in terms of their support for the approach that we were using. We have to make sure that, is that just because they were, they knew it had executive support or not, but we drilled down a little bit more. We asked to what extent it has supported meaningful career development for the members of their team. And this is pretty good. 85% were either supportive or highly supportive. But obviously, when we saw this, we said, okay, there's an opportunity for continuing to move that to the right, to move some of that supportive to the much more highly supportive, given that this was one of the key things that we wanted to drive improvement of in our process, was to make it more focused on having career development conversations. So still pretty strong, but opportunity for improvement. And then we asked them, what did they think that their colleagues perceived, whether this was improvement or not. So 92% positive, either positive impact or very positive impact. And again, opportunity to improve this, but this is also just asking perception. What did they think about what our colleagues, what our employees thought, or what their teams thought. So good feedback from the managers, great. You said, "Hi, we really did an awesome job," but we did think, well, maybe we not only should be asking managers, but maybe we should also be asking the real customers, the employees. What are they thinking? What do they get from this? So how did our colleagues like it? First of all, we asked them how they compared it to the prior approaches that had been used. 73% said it was either somewhat better or much better, so very, very strong. We did have a few neutrals, and even some people who really thought it was a much worse system than they had before. But overall, fairly strong positive at 73%. Quite a bit, still opportunity to improve that. Then we asked them how did this approach affect the career development support that was provided to them by HS, and 57% either somewhat helpful or very helpful, so positive in the right direction, but still an opportunity for continued growth and improvement in the approach. You really try to continue to emphasize that the conversations were the right ones. And this one was pretty good too, is that my manager had helped me understand what specific things I needed to work on to get to the next level, and 68% felt that they would agree with that. So this is good because this is meaning those conversations are starting to happen, and this is the thing that we want to continue to emphasize, having more and more of those conversations, so people really felt good about that they actually knew where they were at. So then we went on and we said, let's inspect and adapt. What could we do to improve this? So first, from the challenges we had some challenges integrating with some legacy HR systems. They were really designed very heavily around a very MBO type approach, and so we had to sort of shoehorn it into the system. But that's what also helped to have some HR support with that. The thing that we also found was with being an old MBO model, it was that the rating, the approach that was there, the rating model was emphasizing more performance over career growth. So it was something we had to change. It was also something that was sort of an internal perception within the organization we had to work around, because we were taking a different approach to the overall performance model or performance management than other parts of the organization. So some things we had to struggle with there. The HR system had very coarse-grained performance ratings, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whereas we had a very graduated scale where any 3.1 was a perfectly valid answer for us. So this created some challenges, retrofitting it into the legacy system, which meant that pretty much everyone worked outside the HR system, got the answer that they needed, and then ended up feeding it into the HR system. So a bit of work, but a bit of extra work, which was, here we say, some redundancies in paperwork, but everyone was still happier with that approach than trying to deal with the legacy system as it was. And then the other thing we discovered, because we went through the exercise and went through the system, it showed some transparency, and that transparency showed some title inconsistencies across the organization, which actually helped explain some behaviors and some reasons why some challenges were going on. So this is a side effect that was both a problem. We saw it surface a problem, but it gave us the opportunity to potentially do something about it as well. The other thing we did is we refined the structure, which we've sort of already seen this within the conversation we just had on the core framework. But we realized that when initially put this together, and when Andrew put together a lot of the documentation that he put on it, he was really focused on the behavior element of it. And I would say I was probably coming in from more of an impact perspective than the behavior side. And so we realized that this merger was really key, that it was both a behavior element and a impact element. And we wanted to call out both of those when we put together, as we refine the system. So I think that was a good improvement. during our process. We also took this beyond software developers. I had taken it beyond software developers before, but when we first started this process, we really emphasized it with software developers, but then we also brought in software quality assurance, and we also started looking at development management, so leadership roles. One of the things we found when we started working with the quality assurance side, so we said, we wanted to try to share the same core responsibilities across the different roles. So we stayed with the 5 because we thought that there was a definite benefit to having that framework, and we thought they were also quite appropriate. What it meant was that what we described in terms of the key contributions would change. So rather than the developer key contributions of things like clean code and integration automation testing, SQA was much more about executing the tests, doing the integration workflows, and being a quality advocate on the team. So these were the types of differences that we put together, and we went through and made more detailed descriptions of what was expected on each of these. So that was an exercise. We also, after I had left, then the organization continued to use this, and they've worked up something for Scrum Masters as well, Scrum Masters, project managers. And we found that it does scale out pretty well. It can be easy. The framework is able to be utilized across a number of different types. So what about leaders? When I had used this in the past, I had sort of used the same framework for leaders. But when we started working on this in more detail, we did with the team that I had at IHS. They had really passionate about making it a little bit different for leaders. So we kept quite a bit of it, but we also changed core responsibilities a little bit. The behaviors and impact still was that mapped out, what level of impact they're having and what types of behaviors. But the core responsibilities, we stayed with the top 3 of delivery, teamwork, and innovation. But we came across 2 additional ones of coaching and mentoring that we thought were quite important in terms of investing in career leadership development, and then collaboration as a broader one of collaborating across organizational lines, whether that's with the business or with other partners. We thought that a leadership role needed to be collaborating in multiple, beyond just building teams, but creating networks of teams. So we get to the question, do performance reviews have to suck? I think that I found that they do not. They're actually things that are useful, and having these conversations we found that the system, that managers liked it and employees felt that they were getting something from it, and really it was no longer the dreaded performance review activity that was being forced on them. If you look at the differences between the approaches, the traditional MBO sets goals cascaded down to individuals. It measures performance against those goals. It rewards performance based on the goals, and it hopes that the goals were the right ones, and it drives the right behavior, and possibly career advancement comes about as well. So that's the wishful thinking of the traditional MBO. The approach we've taken is a bit different, and it sort of flips it upside down, is that we said we want to establish the behaviors and skills that are core to building organizational capacity. We want to provide the ongoing guidance and feedback to help them grow, and we reward based on the promotion scale and expectations that we have and the behaviors and impacts that they have. And we continuously update the goals that we do. It's still okay to have goals, but we're really focused on goals at the team, department, and organizational level. Some of this gets to the difference between theory X and theory Y. In theory X, it's management in a very tight control, really trying to set that management is setting the controls and setting the guidelines. In theory Y, we're trying to create the environment that enables the staff to do what's right. And I think that's I think our approach is quite consistent with a theory Y type model. This I found an interesting survey that an organization did, asking, what do employees say they want versus what employers think they want, and it's amazing to see the difference, the incongruity here, the shift that what really employees are focused on is not at all what employers think that those employees want, based on this survey. And I think that's really important, that what we were able to do is shift our conversations into the things that were the type of things that employees really are interested in, and feeling like they are getting appreciation for the work that they're doing. They're getting in on things and sympathetic help. So the conversations are much more supportive in the approach we've taken. Ultimately, our litmus test, and this sort of where somebody's at, is are they making their team, others on the team, and the organization better, right? And if that's happening, then that's a great sign, right? And if there are things that they are doing that's holding them back from that, that's the conversations that we want to have. That's you're doing great in this area, but it's holding back this ultimate. So with that, that's my contact information, and also Andrew's contact information. That's my book, Stand Back and Deliver, which is not directly about performance reviews, but has elements of just general leadership in an agile approach, and written with some of my colleagues that I've met through the agile and agile conferences. And with that, I'll open it up to questions, and I think, Jill, if you've got anything else you want to wrap up, we'll see where we start here.
Yeah, Todd. At this point, I'd like to encourage everyone to enter questions, as Todd has suggested. Go ahead and feel free to enter them in the chat box. While questions are coming in, though, I'm going to give a quick overview of SynerZip. So, Todd, if you could move the slides forward a little bit, that would help.
Okay. And all right.
Yeah, one more slide, please. So SynerZip is a co-development partner. We focus on working with mid-sized clients to help accelerate the roadmap. Typically, we can do this with a little bit of a savings, given that our delivery mode is through India-based resources, typically, although we do provide U.S. or India-based resources, depending on clients' needs. Advance, please. So here's a list of clients over the last 14 years that SynerZip's been in business. It's a good list. We like our clients. We hope to work with them, for a long time. Next slide. And the next webinar in our series is the Intrapreneur's Journey, Empowering Employees to Drive Growth. That's going to be Wednesday, March 20th. Feel free to jump onto the SynerZip website and register for that. If this topic interests you, we'd love to have you join. All right, let's get on to the questions. So one of the questions that came up is, could you clarify the place of goals in this framework? Meaning, it seems like you're saying that goals aren't important, but that's probably not what you're saying. So can you clarify that?
Yeah, so I think so individual goals as a measurement tool, I think are problematic. I don't think that does not mean that goals are something that we should not have. Goals at the team level can be valuable. Goals at the organization level, even goals at an individual level can be valuable. But I wouldn't be tying goals to a measurement and to a performance assessment. Right? I really tried to put the performance assessment in terms of what are they doing relative to our general expectations, not relative to a specific goal that we set.
So you'd use goals to help them increase their behaviors, but not as a way of measuring overall success.
Yeah, as a motivate of something. This is what we're trying to do, but not as I found that when we put goals as a measurement approach for individuals for knowledge work, it's more problematic than beneficial.
Yeah, in my experience, I've always had goals be more of an optional a way of sort of extending yourself beyond your current limits. So that seems in line with your thinking.
Exactly. I think goals as a conversation. Hey, this is something we're aiming for, right? That's great. Right? Let's have that conversation, and we can help you. If I know that's if I as a leader know that's one of the things we're working on together, then I can orient things, and I can be that leader that helps you in that partnership that takes you to that goal, right? But it's more of a maybe long-term, this is aspirational than objective, let's say.
So one of the things you mentioned was that the scale you used was quite granular. Which granularity and scale have you used in your?
Oh, okay. So yeah. So the problem we had with the HR system that it was a very fixed. It was a 5 point. It was a scale of 5, and it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you only had 5 answers to 5 approaches to either they met, they were sort of exceeded or significantly exceeded. So, but if you look at sort of where we were placing our dots on our scale, we could put a dot anywhere in the it could be so it was just it was a real number as opposed to an integer. Right now, typically we were people were going with numbers like 3.1 versus 3.1 or 3.2, but we didn't have any constraint on what people would use for that. If they wanted to use pi as their number, they could go ahead and use pi. So,
so a scale of 1 to 100, like an integer scale of 1 to 100 is probably sufficient, right? For example.
Yeah, well, we had to fit ourselves into a 1 to 5 scale, so that's why we used rational numbers, or within a 1 to 5 scale, but the end game had to fit it into an integer system with a 1 to 5. So that was the challenges that we encountered. But it turns out it was more for reporting than actual. It had no final meaning. So I mean, the conversations were what we really cared about.
So another question just came in. Someone is suggesting they run a test organization, and they're wondering if there's tools or suggestions you have with getting objectives aligned across teams.
Yeah, so I think what if they're running a testing organization, so then they have to look at, well, what are the goals, and what do they have as goals for the organization, and are they trying to measure those objectively? What we were looking at was predominantly how we measuring our employees in that organization relative to a much more subjective guide, which is the behaviors and impacts that they're making. And that way we could also measure people. It's a much cleaner way. I think one of the reasons our employees really liked it is it gave everyone a level playing field. Everyone knew that they were being measured for the same, on the same playing field as everyone else. They knew what the playing field was, and it didn't matter what project they were on. If they were on a bad project or something they didn't, didn't provide some of the opportunities, they were still being measured on the same thing. So that gave them some more opportunity. They really felt like this created a level playing field for that. So that's what I would look for in your organization is what can you do? The approach that I have is certainly, if anyone wants to find out more about it, certainly reach out to me. I can make some of the material available to you, and you can sort of look at it and see if it gives you a starting point. We do always encourage people to look at whether, when they take what we provided, whether they want to customize it for their organization a little bit differently. I will say that I have had pretty good success making it transfer from one organization to another organization, but always want to look at your own organization and see what you might want to do differently.
Yeah, Todd, thanks for that. Going back to the last question, there's just a clarifying question that when you're looking at the scale, let's say 1 to 5, and if you go back to the slides where it shows the grid, One is essentially the first box, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like 5 is the entire scope of the rows, correct?
Yeah, so let me pull up one of those. Yeah, we got one there. Okay. Yeah, so what we've got here are the different levels, and repeat that again. The last what you had.
I'm just saying that
From 1 to 5.
for each level, 5 is at the highest impact behavior column, and 1 is at the bottom. Right? That's the scale.
Yeah, so actually the way we ended up working it is that our HR system sort of considered the red line to be a 3. So basically, if you were performing at 1 line ahead, we would consider that to be a 4 in our it would be in how it would go back in the system. And we thought if you're performing at the next level, that's sort of the indication that you're 1 step ahead, right? So that was the sort of the way we calibrated the system. So this was something that actually was a bit of a challenge because we had when we initially were rolling it out, we had different people calibrating it different ways.
Right.
And so it is one of the things you do have to work on is making sure the organization has some sort of calibration approach to it if you want to make it consistent.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the one we chose.
Another question just popped in on this same concept, which is an entry-level person coming in. Would they be expected to be at the bottom, or a true entry level, like college freshman type, or fresh out of college person?
Yes, a freshman out of college would be expected to be down here at the very at the lowest with direction. They're coming in, and the expectations are quite low. They're operating usually at a simple user story with direction. Okay, that's the and if they're performing above that, then that's great. Right? But that's the level we're starting them at, and then we're looking to move them on to the next level. To take on more responsibility and bigger impact as they can. So yes, they would. That's sort of where we would be expecting them starting in at the bottom with the opportunity and helping them figure out how they can grow into more responsibility over time.
So this is an interesting point. The person in the audience said, so 1s are not bad depending on your expectations of that person. I think that's a really powerful point.
Yeah, it's got to be relative to expectations, right? So exactly. And then what we would end up doing so if they got a 1 on this chart, when we would feed that back into the HR system, it would come as a 3 because that would be the norm expected. They're performing right at what they're expected at. So it's a matter of fitting, if we didn't have to fit it into the legacy system, that forced a certain behaviors on us, then you're free to interpret it however you wish, right? But we did have that constraint on us. So you have to work within the constraints you have.
Great, and I think that's it for our questions. We've reached the end of our webinar time, and I'd like to thank you, Todd, and the audience for joining us today. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Todd or myself, or look us up on synerzip.com. Once again, Todd, thank you.
Thank you very much.